Greetings, travelers! Welcome back to another episode of Eerie Travels. I'm your host, Mark Muncy, author of the Eerie, Florida book series, and now Eerie Appalachia from History Press. And thank you for joining us, as always. And this week, we've got some fun locations for you. We're going to be traveling Alligator Alley in Florida, and we're going to be talking about secrets, places all along from one end to the other. We'll be starting at the famous and possibly infamous Smallwood Store, and then we'll be moving a little further along. We'll pass the Skunk Ape headquarters, which we've done on our previous episode with Dave Shealy, but we'll be talking about an infamous incident that happened along Alligator Alley that changed the way the federal government documents certain events. Kind of crazy, involving the paranormal. And then we'll wind up out near Miami, where we're going to go to some of the craziest locations that you can go to really experience natural Florida and a little unnatural Florida. And then finally, we'll be ending our day at probably one of the coolest collections you can get to at the end of Alligator Alley over in Delray Beach. And it's a place that I think you're going to love. So join us for these Eerie Travels. So as we begin, you head down to Alligator Alley. Now, Alligator Alley is now I-75, and it just goes south through Florida on the Gulf Coast, and then cuts across the state just above the Everglades. Actually, kind of cuts through the north part of the Everglades, and then moves south down into Miami. We're talking about classic Alligator Alley, which you go a little further south, and you go all the way down to Fort Myers, and then down to Naples, and then even further south, and you get to an area that is the home of the 10,000 Islands. It's the mouth of the 10,000 Islands. And there, a man named Ted Smallwood built a business. He originally started doing, just trading work with the natives of the area. He loved the Seminoles in the area. And so in Okaleski, Florida, he opened the Smallwood Store. It was basically kind of an early Walmart, an early 7-Eleven. He did trading with the natives. And then as more and more settlers moved in and more people started gathering their bits of the islands, he started trading with them. He opened the first post office. So the first post office in the Everglades is down there. So there's Ted Smallwood there and in his post office shop, and he ran that for many, many years. Now, in this shop and around this shop, dealing with the Native Americans and dealing with the early settlers was a man named Watson. And this man owned everything and everyone. He had a little piece of loans on everybody. He was taking over farms. He was claiming houses out there. And he had a bit of a reputation as even more of a scoundrel. And people who were working on his property would suddenly turn up missing. Or he would say, oh, they found a better job, or they went away. He was also known for hiring people with lower reputations. So he would say, oh, they, packed up and left in the night because they were wanted men, stuff like that. Well, a young girl in town went missing, and she would last been seen at Watson's house out on the island. And it was a big to-do because she was not of ill repute. She was much beloved in the town. And it was a bad scene. Suddenly her body turned up in the waters near Watson's house. So Mr. Watson came into town, and the citizens of the area around the Smallwood Store decided to take their vengeance. And he was shot 37 times by people in the town. Now, whether it was justified or not, no one knows. There was no able to prove his innocence or his guilt. We do know people there feared him enough to gang up to kill him. Now his spirit is still seen there at the Smallwood Store. And you can go visit the Smallwood Store today. It is a wonderful little tourist place. And there's the book on the killing of Mr. Watson, the Edgar Watson story. There's illustrations of him. This is all a nice little display there. And the Smallwood Store is an amazing collection of artifacts from all throughout South Florida history. And it is right on the edge of the Everglades. And you can actually walk out onto the back, onto that dock, and look out over the 10,000 islands, or the 1,000 islands they call it. And there is just a wonderful feeling as you go into this place, knowing how much history is there. And there are several notable items that are here. They've got a bunch of Seminole items from early chieftains. They have one of Chief Tiger Tail's artifacts here, one of his tomahawk blades. And there's where you can walk out onto the dock and see that amazing land out there and just look at a piece. And people imagine just coming up here in your canoe or your kayak and, you know, doing your trading in fish and bones and pelts and furs and more. And, you know, then he would give you some cash for it, or, you know, you could trade for other things. There is still a movie that plays here that is the history of the area. There's members of the Smallwood family, members of the Watson family. They have their history here. The Seminole tribe has a lot of their history here. A lot of the Creek Indians have some of their history here because they were forced into this area for some time before the Seminole Wars. Now, they were at war with the Seminoles, so they didn't stay here long. But again, just an incredible place. And thankfully, we also got to talk to the current owner of the Smallwood Store. She had some supernatural occurrences. All these wonderful books right here that are all on Florida history had been blown over one morning. Now, they do get some gale force winds in there. It is an old store. She reset them up, walked back out of the room. 2 seconds later, she saw them all knocked over again. And there was no wind at that point. She saw some other things, and, you know, it's probably better just to let her tell them yourself. So, let's go.
When the store was built, became an actual store in 1917. Ted Smallwood started by trading with the Indians, and as more white people went out and acquired land out on the 10,000 islands, there was a need for a postmaster, a general store, and so on and so forth. So that is why you have the Walmart of yesterday here. And then Edgar Watson, I don't know you the story about Edgar Watson, who is my great-grandfather, was shot and killed in 1910 on the dock out here by about 30 or 40 of the townsmen. And then they were so scared of him that they, not only did they kill him, they tied him up by the neck, drug him behind the boat, and buried him face down at Rabbit Key, and put a boulder on top of him. And I always thought it was his daughter Carrie, but it wasn't. It was his son-in-law, I think it was Carrie, that went and retrieved his remains, and now he is buried at Fort Myers Cemetery, along with his father, Elijah, who was also nicknamed Ring Eye Elijah because he had a huge scar from here to here from getting in a fight.
Fun people. Yes. So where do they find you if they want to like order stuff like because you've got a lot of fun stuff here, or they just got to come here?
They've got to come here. I mean, everybody had to come by boat, and you could tell the people that were wealthier than the others because you could hear them coming because they had the little trolling motor. But no, they would come by boat, and it was definitely not like Amazon Prime. If you ordered something, it could be here next month. But the neat thing is there's a conch over there, the conch shell, that Ted Smallwood would blow to inform everybody on the islands that I've got mail. Here I come. And so, he just, he did a lot of, I think he did a lot of good things with the relationships between the Indians and the white people. So.
And then you've had some unusual experiences because we are Eerie Travels. Yes. So
my first experience was that I closed up and I make sure all my shirts are nice and folded. My shirts came in the next day and they're all thrown on the floor because I opened and I shut. The second one was the books. I had, I showed you a picture of the books. Yeah. I had the books. I came in, the books were all knocked down. Took a picture of it, because I want to make sure that I documented it. Turned around to talk facing this way at a customer, and by the time I turned back around, they were all knocked down again.
Nice.
So, you see it's windy in here right now.
But
we've had some gale force winds in here, and they don't touch the books. Also, about a week and a half ago, I locked up and shut all the windows, all the doors, finished my register, heard a loud sneeze. And I'm thinking to myself, I locked somebody outside. There's nobody outside. So I politely said, bless you, Mr. Watson, and walked out the door.
Well, thank you so much for having us, and we'll look around a little bit. So.
Please stay with joy.
So once again, definitely worth a trip. Head out to the Smallwood Store, and who knows what you might find. So well worth your start as you go from west to east on Alligator Alley. Now, Old Alligator Alley, you go a little further along, you'll pass the Skunk headquarters. You'll pass one of our favorite stops, which is just that wonderful, just a little stop right along the Everglades there, and you never know how many alligators you're going to see, but I guarantee you'll see one or two as long as it's not, just the cold time of year. But you got to watch for panthers. You've got to watch for all kinds of animals along that path. It is only a 2-lane road, so it is not that wonderful interstate. This is the stop that my wife and I always make sure we stop at, it's probably the last real facilities you have before you hit Old Alligator Alley, and you're just nothing. And then this, on the other end of Alligator Alley, is what you will find. One of the fun places to go is Everglades Outpost. Now, this is a rescue for animals, and as you can see, they have tons and tons of alligators. They also rescue all kinds of animals. They have tigers, they have foxes, they have a zebra, they have a camel, they have all these pets that they're having to rescue. Also some exotic other animals. You can spend $400 and you can spend an hour actually swimming with the alligators. Chris, who is one of their guests, who has one of their keepers, he has an alligator that he works with a lot named Casper, and they have a YouTube channel and an Instagram channel that you can follow, and he teaches a lot about alligators. But you can actually go into the water with them, and he carefully segregates you away from them, but you can sit right behind a small little piece of plexiglass and watch Casper the gator swimming around. Now, you can also grab biscuits for a small fee and help feed the gators. There's Chris with Casper and doing the selfie with the gator. And definitely do not try this at home. And he is a trained professional. And they have Florida panther. And the panthers were having a very hot day, but they were enjoying themselves. They do have a big white tiger there currently that is being rehabbed. They have lots and lots of turtles and lots of other fun animals. And it is an amazing place, well worth your hard-earned money to help support. And definitely go there. And there's their website, and Everglades Outpost. Everglades.com. You can get tickets and you can do the behind the scenes tour, which you can see their foxes and you can see some of their other animals that aren't available for the regular public. A worthy cause. Now, a short distance from there is a strange memorial that a lot of people don't understand. It just a bunch of stones up on the side of a lock. And what it is it's the memorial of Flight 592. Now, this was a plane that crashed in the Everglades in the 1980s. There is another crash that occurred just 3 miles from that location that has no memorial. But this plane crash caused more changes to FAA rules than any other plane crash in history up to that point. We're talking about the 1973 crash of Flight 401. Now, this Eastern Airlines plane was flying from New York to Miami and had done a long run up from Miami to New York and was returning home for the day. This Lockheed L1011 was brand new off the line. It had only done a few hundred hours of flight. And as you can see, this is a very spacious plane, very comfortable for its day. The crew loaded and were heading in, and they had Captain Loft, and they had the co-pilot, and they had the engineer, and Don Leppo. And they had several stewardesses, and that is the crew of Flight 401. As they were coming into Miami, they couldn't get the indicator light to come on for the landing gear coming down. They couldn't find that it was coming down. So Captain Loft there on the left tried everything he could. He had the co-pilot there in the middle, couldn't figure out how to get the light to indicate. And they thought it was a burned out bulb. It had happened before. But Don Leppo there on the end, the engineer, they asked him to go into an area underneath the cockpit called the hellhole. And down there, you could see there was a little pinwheel hole there that you could actually confirm that the landing gear was down. So Don goes down there. Now, while they were trying to figure out how to get the light working, they turned on the autopilot and had informed Miami that air traffic control that they were going to circle over the Everglades and take a little stroll out and then come back for landing once they can confirm. They could make an emergency landing without a nose gear. It's actually fairly common at that time, but they didn't know 100%. And what happened was, somehow, while they were trying to figure it out, they accidentally turned off the autopilot or somehow turned off the altitude hold button. And when they had turned that off, they were slowly sinking from 2,000 feet and going down and down. All the while, Don is down in the hellhole trying to to get to the front to see if the landing gear is down. Now, air traffic control calls them and says, "Is everything okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're just trying to figure this out." The air traffic controller didn't ask why he was calling and to see if everything was okay, because he had noticed the slight dip in their altitude, but it was too late. Don Leppo saw the landing gear was down, but he also saw trees. They were down under 200 feet. They crashed within minutes into the Everglades. Now, because they had been circling and because they had been slowing down, the crash was not as bad as it could have been. As you see, it was in pieces, but there were survivors. 75 of the 300 on board survived. The main problem was there was no light. This was late at night in the swamp. People were having to come out in boats to help rescue these survivors. And as you can see, it was spread over a long area. So one of the stewardesses' main complaints that survived was they had no light to help find people. This is swampland. As you can see it now, it's just swamp, and it's right off the Francis Taylor Wildlife Management area. And you can go there, but you need a boat to go out to Flight 401. There is the Flight 592 Memorial. Again, just 3 miles away from the actual site of Flight 401. Now, what happened was Flight 401, because this was a relatively new plane, and several large pieces of it were intact, they took bits of it and placed it in other planes. Now, in doing so, to replace parts in other L1011s. And when they did that, things got weird. People started seeing the dead Captain Loft or the dead engineer Don Leppo on those other planes. And they would say, be careful of the engine. This engine might flame out. Sure enough, later that plane had a flame out on an engine. One person mentioned that he appeared in a oven, and they saw Don Leppo's reflection in an oven, and he said, be careful of this oven. And sure enough, the oven caught fire on that flight. This became infamous amongst Eastern Airlines. They would immediately take logbooks where anybody had recorded something unusual and get rid of them and replace the plane with a brand new logbook. They would give the employee some leave because obviously they were crazy. They saw a ghost. This went on for years until the stewardesses and the pilots fought back and said, wait a minute, we're seeing strange stuff. You can't just put us on leave because we saw something unusual. We're not crazy. Finally, the vice president of Eastern Airlines was talking with a pilot as he was about to fly out, and this pilot was giving him some good advice, and then another pilot came on board. And the vice president was like, well, I thought you were the pilot, and the man had disappeared next to him. So he saw the ghost of Captain Loft. So this became so huge that it went to the FAA, and the Federal Aviation Authority actually passed some rules saying you cannot change logbooks on planes. You also cannot force a pilot or stewardess to take psychiatric evaluation time off because they claim they saw a ghost. So the Federal Aviation Authority had to actually change this. Now this was so infamous, it was spawned a infamous TV movie starring Ernest Borgnine, and I think we have that trailer.
From the national bestseller, The Ghost of Flight 401, comes a chilling drama of the supernatural.
I feel his presence.
The ghost of Samoa appears only on ASA plans.
Ernest Borgnine and Gary Lockwood star in this thriller based on actual events.
So while you're driving along Alligator Alley, you can stop at that memorial. Flight 592 is a different disaster, and it was also tragic, but doesn't quite have the paranormal reputation of Flight 401. But this amazing memorial that you can visit has all kinds of artistic creations. It's got the coral around it, but these stones each represent one of the people who died on Flight 592. Now, sadly, as we said, there is no memorial for Flight 401. So many people take the opportunity of this memorial to pay homage to both tragic flights. And it is odd that both incidents were less than a mile or two apart, but not too odd considering this is Miami Airport's main flight path, and flying over the Everglades is a nice safe place to have planes fly when they're not doing well and you don't want them crashing into the city. And people often leave offerings there for Flight 592. Now, our last location is in Delray Beach. You've made it to the end of Alligator Alley. You've gone over a little further back north, and you go to Delray Beach. And there, in Delray Beach, you can go to the Blue Anchor Pub, which, infamously tied to Jack the Ripper. We talked in a previous episode. You can also find Murders on the Beach, which is a bookstore that's moved around a few times and is reopening soon in the textbook store that specializes in mysteries. But you can also go to one of the coolest locations we've ever been to, Silverball Museum. Silverball Museum is a large collection of pinball machines and arcade machines, and it is in an old train station and stables that has been converted into this amazing place. And up here in the Kiss Lounge area, where they have the old Kiss pinball machine, this area is notoriously haunted. The bartenders there refuse to work there after 11 p.m. Because strange things happen. The machines keep kicking on and strange noises occur. But the place itself is amazing. There is so many pinball machines from all eras and so many arcade machines there that you can play. And it's pay one time for X amount of hours, and you can have your events there. They have a wonderful bar downstairs. Now, the reason for the haunting is that when this place was a stable yard, it was also right on the train line, and this is where they hung people as an example for passing criminals. You would see the man hanging from the stable yard line as the trains would go by to show we don't take kindly to criminals here. But in the meantime, you can go in here and get your 1970s gamer fix on. I played around a gyrus on the old machine myself, got to play some Pinbot and Gorgar, and they have classic machines. It's an incredible place. So wind up your night in a haunted pinball palace. How can you go wrong? Well, thank you so much, and we will see you next week on more Eerie Travels.